All right, we are live with something of an annual Hobo Day tradition now, where we don't do it late night because, to be honest, it's Hobo Day. I'm out, and busy, and so we do it today. And I'm all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, obviously, because who wouldn't be? Borg, thank you for adjusting your schedule with us. Appreciate it. And how you doing, my man?
I'm doing all right. Have to get used to the fact I'm on my home computer or on my laptop. Yeah. Thanks, buddy. I gotta get this guy on now because I'm at home. This is Dean. We had your newborn on. Oh, now you don't want to be on the camera. Hi there, buddy.
Now we're camera shy.
Now we're camera shy. We just like to be off camera. He's gonna play with some toys. You might hear him in the background a little bit today, but no, doing pretty good. Obviously, I know you were all nighter with start at midnight, go till noon. No, Dustin, that's not going to happen. Could happen next week. You never know. If we end up, still not sure what the travel plans are going to be if we're going to Fargo, or definitely not sure how the next 2 weeks are going to work since we really don't know. We don't know the game time yet for USD, and obviously 7 o'clock next week is going to be interesting. But pretty good. Another good week of football, and as stated in my header down below, the fun is beginning.
Yeah, it starts now. It gets real wild. There were some results yesterday, not nearly as many as last week, but there were some results that were eye-popping. I owe Ron Lowney $50. Unfortunately, he's not here. I wasn't ducking you, Ron. It was Hobo Day, and it wasn't so much that I went and partied too much, but it was just getting home in time, and everything else didn't work out. But man, on the game. Well, first, before we do this, I need to remember.
We got to plug the sponsors. Probably
we are brought to you by Kubota Dealers of South Dakota. They are a title sponsor with 10 locations across the great state of South Dakota. There's always a Kubota dealer near you. Parts, sales, and service. Get yourself into some orange equipment today. They've got anything you might need for your farmstead, your acreage, or your yard. They've got all the equipment available, so get down and get into some orange equipment today. And our title sponsor our show sponsor is Jackrabbit Central in Brookings, South Dakota. Obviously the bookstore and a location downtown. They're also online. They have the stadium store. Jackrabbit Central is going to be the place to be, especially on Tuesday for Touchdown Tuesday. That's definitely maxed out. I think we'll get the full. I think it's 25% off all purchases at the Jackrabbit Central. So that's the best place to get all your Jackrabbit gear. Plus they have the bargain den or the discount den or whatever they call it in the back. That place is awesome. I always go perusing through there to see if we get some good deals when I get into the main one. So go to Jackrabbit Central for all your Jackrabbit gear. But boy, they I talk about these games where it's a mismatch, but then the better team, you can tell on special teams, like if they're locked in or not. They start with a special teams gaff, they drop the kickoff, whatever. This was the opposite. We were a little late tearing down. I was almost to my seats, and we had scored a touchdown already. Angel Johnson houses the opening kickoff, and it didn't slow down from there. The onslaught never ended. It was absolute domination. Chase Mason this time had a day. Seems like somebody different every game has a monster game. Chase was crazy. Reading or listening to the post-game show from Tyler Merriam, the lowest yards per carry was Amar Johnson at like 9.8 or something. And Chase averaged like 30. Kirby Truck and Voorhees averaged like 25 or 26 yards per carry. I mean, the Hogs dominated in the run game. That was really fun to watch. Mark had a solid game, still had 200 some yards. I haven't looked up the full stats yet on this because I was a little late getting down here. But man, it was an utter beat down. And, that's kind of what you expect when the better team starts hot, right? They started off, jumped on them out of the gate. You kind of take away their hope right away, go up 14-0 on them, and then it was kind of all over from there.
Yeah, I'd love to see what the statistic is for how many times a team wins when they return the opening kickoff to start a game. It's got to be pretty lopsided. I mean, you knew, yeah, Good one, KP. They just, I mean, what was the final stat? I think it was 40. You had 43 total. I think you mentioned it, 40. Obviously, dealing with my 4-year-old is a little bit, but yeah, 43 total plays, 63 points. It's what, a point a minute, basically, or a point a play, something like that. Just, it was one of those things where I'll say they at least balanced it in the second half. They got Gronowski some passing plays because it was mostly all done with the run, and they didn't really need to do anything else because they were just so incredibly dominant up front. Another obviously shout out game to the Hogs. One point it was basically Viborg Hurley had 21 points in the game because you had Chase Mason with 2 touchdowns and Angel Johnson with he almost broke one on that 30-yard run as well. I think as we said last week that I think we don't have to worry about Angel not getting his carries. The guy's kind of the X factor on the team right now. Really is. So I think they're just in a really good place with those running backs. They seem to have found, but obviously the tougher tests begin in a couple days. It's going to be, just there really isn't much more to say. Youngstown is clearly pretty down. They lost a lot in the transfer portal. And they were a pretty good team last year, although SDSU went into Youngstown last year and beat them pretty good, but that was last year's SDSU team. Exactly. So I think I thought their quarterback for Youngstown wasn't too bad. I thought he provided some challenges, but and there were maybe a few little concerns, I think maybe defensively as you go into these next 2 weeks. But hard to really complain. It was funny because I saw Christian, I'm sure some people saw Christian Roseboom was on the sideline, the current Los Angeles Ram, and I even said it to him in passing. It was fitting because at kickoff return, when it got returned, that's as loud as it reminded me instantly of the first Hobo Day game at Youngstown State where he had the pick 6.
Yep.
I think that's about as loud as I'd ever heard the building. It still might be as loud as I ever heard the building. And sure enough, up until maybe Angel returned that kickoff. So it was funny to have Christian there for a Hobo Day with Youngstown, and here's kind of the same noise right off the bat with Angel. So a lot of good memories. And, even some of the nitpicks I think we have, it's kind of tough to nitpick when you get up that big. You're gonna let your foot off the gas a little bit, So
yeah, and I'm sure some people are, the passing game wasn't that great or whatever. But you 404 rushing yards on 25 attempts. You don't need you don't use the pass game in that game. You just run the ball, and you're up by 1 billion, so you're not going to pass the ball much anyways. So, I think their quarterback actually, he was kind of a blessing because if Cam Miller is mobile, he is a good warm up of sorts for facing that. He was real squirrely. Kid could really run. He made some really impressive throws. He was a solid quarterback. I think if they can keep him, that'll help him a lot. As far as Youngstown goes, I think the transfer portal really hurt them because they've been trying to build their program similarly to the way SDSU and NDSU have, where they build it through recruiting and all these other things. And, when the portal hits a team like SDSU, which we haven't had that issue yet, but the transfer portal comes for us all. That's the reality. But NDSU's gotten hit pretty hard, but they're still really good because they've been building that way for years and have been very good at it for years. Whereas, Youngstown State, you're just in the beginning of trying to start like that. That's really killer. So that I think is part of what has put them in this position. They just weren't very good. Seth Meyer, he says, Cam looked very limited mobility wise yesterday. I didn't get to watch any of that game. That's what I've heard all over the place is he was banged up. Sounds like they might have had a couple other guys banged up. Really hope those guys are healthy.
That's going to maybe be an issue. I was listening to some podcasts from them coming into the podcast coming into our show today. I didn't watch a ton, but apparently Miller, there was one play late in the half where he kind of had a weird dump off pass, and they said he was really noticeable. I just don't really know why they bothered to Oh, well, I mean, I guess the result of that game, they were not an explosive. They had been really explosive offensively the last couple of weeks, and you see what happens when he's not mobile. And I question how much confidence they have in Cole Payton at this point. I mean, and I've said this too. I think that was my other main takeaway from yesterday is just how much in his bag Ryan Olsen is right now. I mean, you think about how worried. I don't want to say worried, but there were similar to what happened a couple of years ago when Zach Lujan had just taken over as offensive coordinator. It was, well, slow start. What's going on here? And then as things got rolling, he got comfortable, and but man, the way they're using Chase Mason right now is just. I mean, I'll be curious to ask Jimmy on Tuesday because I would not want to be a defensive coordinator. I mean, it's the difference, and we've made fun of this Cole Payton package for them, and partially because they hyped it too. I mean, they were saying all offseason, you're going to see Cole in all these different alignments, and well, that's the way SDSU is using Chase Mason. I mean, and I'm hopeful. And by the way, for those who don't know, it was announced. Actually, you and I both saw this. I think we had the Montana State game on at the same time.
Yep.
The SDSU NDSU marker game, 7:00 on ESPN2. If you have not heard by now, ideal time slot. Maybe not for the local TV guys who may be going live, or that could be ending literally right as we're trying to go on air. We'll see, but ideal for both programs. Yeah, you want to watch the Jackrabbits on national TV? Yeah, that's the better one because they're going to get more eyeballs on ESPN. I mean, I think Midco and WDAY would have probably had more audience than ESPNU, to be honest with you, because ESPNU is such a limited, unfortunately, platform. And I hope we get a similar thing the following week where it can be on ESPN2 with the Jackrabbit game and Coyote game. I don't know. I think that'll largely depend on how the two teams do. If the Jackrabbits win, I think it's very possible it's back on ESPN2. And if the Coyotes and if the Jackrabbits lose, it might be ESPNU. And I'm not going to get too much into it, but if both the Jacks and Coyotes win, there's even I think there's a shot game day comes back. But obviously, you're not going to have to worry about that talk all week because there's going to be the focus on the marker game. But Chase, the way they deploy him, I mean, you see him line up in the backfield. You see him line up at quarterback. He lines up at receiver. I mean, it's just, how do you defense that? And we'll see him run. We'll see him pass. He'll catch a pass. And sometimes he's lined up and they don't even go to him. Like that's how you need to do this. Meanwhile, with Payton, I think the thing with, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't think I've even seen Payton line up with Cam Miller. I'm not sure I've ever seen that.
I've seen them on the field at the same time. And I think a lot of times
I definitely haven't seen it very often if it has.
I've definitely seen it happen. Excuse me. Ron, I will you pick your charity and I'll pay to it. Whatever one. I don't know. I don't think they have a Alex's Lemonade Stand guy, so I will be paying my $50. We'll figure out wherever you want that to go. I will send the $50. But ESPN2, like you said, that's really cool. That is what this game deserves to, at minimum, be on, in my opinion. I know it's going to be tough for an FCS team, unless you're an HBCU or something, to get on full ESPN. But getting on ESPN2 at 7, I mean, primetime game, that is a really good deal. That should be a lot of fun. I know there was some talk about, well, maybe game day goes to this one. I didn't see that happening just with the games that were in competition with it. Like you said, if the Jacks win, I think there's real potential for the next weekend. Against USD, like you said. Once again, the Valley being kind enough to give us the back-to-back rivalry games, which in the past maybe wasn't such a big deal, but now USD is very good this year. I'll say it. I was wrong. I thought they were going to fall off after last year. I did not have a lot of confidence in their defense to just come back and be good. They've been very good. So hats off to them. I think I managed to pick their game right last week because they did start a little slow on on D-days, but they did go and smack them at the end eventually anyways, which wasn't too much of a surprise.
I can't remember, did the quarterback that you and I switched to, did he play at all against SDSU in garbage time?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't watch any
I'm
of
gonna
the
look
USD
that up here
game.
real quick. Because I'm kind of curious. I'm actually talking about when SDSU played. Did you and I ever switch away from Dunn?
They did. Yep, they
Okay.
definitely switched from Dunn.
Obviously, you and I started the backup quarterback. I don't think they ever played Dunn. I don't know if Dunn's hurt or if they just decided they were, no pun intended, they're done with Dunn.
Yeah.
Maybe that might have factored in a bit. Different quarterback, different look. Maybe they were practicing for Dunn. Got a little surprised out of the gate because you and I certainly did start off great. I didn't see as much of that game as you gotta stop singing, buddy. I know you're having a fun time there. But I think it's been I just think the Jacks will win. I'm tempted. I don't think it's gonna be by 3 touchdowns. I will say something that could come back to bite me, but I've been on kind of a roll because I did kind of accurately predict what was going to happen yesterday because I said, don't be worried about a trap game. I said both teams are going to basically be processed into ground beef with you and I and Youngstown. He still has a I think the tougher matchup right now for the Jackrabbits might actually be the Coyotes. I realize what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's going to be easy by any means next week. It's going to be tough going in there, but there's a lot of factors right now. The Bison are banged up. We've mentioned Miller. Like I said, I listened to some post-game stuff with the Bison. He's not the only one. They got a lot of defensive injuries going right now. They still played well defensively, and that game was close throughout against Southern Illinois, but it was one of those things where it was just kind of I don't know, offensively, Miller he didn't have his mobility. Excuse me, I got my little frog in my throat. I got my little froggy here. Miller didn't have his mobility, and that affected him. I think he was negative rushing yards for the first time in a long time. Couldn't roll out and pass the same way, although his passing numbers were still pretty good. Youngstown, as we know, their defense is shattered. Offensively, they just couldn't do anything. They had a 4th-string quarterback, but they were down a couple linebackers, got hurt in the game. They were missing a couple guys who had been out anyway. So we'll see. I mean, they might magically get healthy. That's the way it tends to roll. But I think those injury, and of course, you would like to see them healthy because if the Jacks win, that's going to be the company line in Fargo. They'll say, well, wait till we see you the next time, and then we'll beat you when we're healthy. But I think some of those I think just one thing I've seen between the Coyotes and Bison is both teams return so many 6th-year guys. You look back at last year's Jackrabbit team. You look back at last year's Jackrabbit team, and what really separated them from everybody else was how many 6th-year and 5th-year guys they had. And that was something that the Bison and the Coyotes kind of had this year coming into it. And what kind of, I guess what stands out is I think the Coyotes have been a little more consistent. The Bison have just been so up and down all year. And I fully expect the Bison are going to come out and play well, but the Coyotes at this point in time have been a little more consistent in all things. And so right now, I think the Coyotes are playing a little better. I do expect the Bison are giving them everything in Fargo, but there's just something. It's just been, I haven't been able to put my finger on it. The Bison just haven't been able to get it all together for the full year. Defensively, I think they're playing pretty well, but also like I said, the injuries are piling up with NDSU. Right now, we just don't know what their status is going to be in that regard. So, like I said, I don't know. Like the Coyotes could be the tougher matchup right now for the Jacks, even though that game's going to be in Brookings. I still expect it to be a good game next week by all means, and it could very well come down to the last minute as it did 2 years ago, and it usually tends to. But, we'll see. We'll put a pin on that and see if I'm right in another week or two, another week. But
I
the
think
Bison have some issues. They're definitely banged up.
I think the deciding factor for me is that it's in Fargo compared to in Brookings. If they were both in Brookings or both games on the road, maybe I'd be inclined to agree with you. I do think the streak that SDSU's had against NDSU is going to be a factor as well, just from a motivation standpoint. Not that USD isn't going to want to beat SDSU, the worst in the world, but I really think NDSU is going to be way up for this game. They've been hearing about it for a long time, and I think they're finally sick of it. The whole "you play for rocks, we play for rings" thing that's gone by the wayside. You can't really say that anymore if you're NDSU. The shoe's on the other foot a little bit, so to speak, after the last 4 or 5 years or so. So this is going to be a fun one up in Fargo. I think USD is going to be a very tough matchup. Obviously, I'm hesitant to say that they are above NDSU just because, and this isn't a dig, I do think NDSU has played slightly tougher competition, and we've seen this before from NDSU. It's what we compare SDSU starts to sometimes over the last couple of years. In 2022, we compared it to this, and this year we've compared it to this a little bit, where they start maybe a little slower, they get going, they start gelling, the offensive line starts to come together, they get everything rolling, and defense gets locked in, and then they're NDSU. That's what it is. So, but so Brian throwing some shade. We play for filling both hands with rings. You play for fingers still, and hands are pretty empty here the last couple of years. But
well, and I do think, to be fair, you're right about the Bison wanting to win this game, and I've even heard that point. I mean, up there is the points being made that it's not just that they've been losing to SDSU. It's I think starting with that title game, especially, it became clear that SDSU had kind of passed them.
Oh, we lost you. I lost your speaker. You're on mute. Here you go. Now you're muted.
Sorry, I accidentally hit a button. I think people kind of knew that who were down at the title game, and I've heard this, and obviously I wasn't at the title game when they played, but it was pretty clear that the Jacks were going to win that game unless something catastrophic happened. And that's when I think people kind of knew there was a noticeable talent gap, and people had really felt like, okay, SDSU had passed NDSU. And last year, even though it wasn't quite the blowout I think people maybe thought it would be, you never felt like it was in doubt last year between SDSU and NDSU. So really, maybe for the first time, at least since probably the latter, since the 2009 period, the Jacks had passed the Bison. They were the better program. So, I'd heard somebody saying, well, we got to remember, this isn't the big one. I mean, the big one could be if they meet in the playoffs again, which could well happen. But somebody was saying, well, no, for the Bison, they really need this to they haven't had, aside from the fact they haven't had the marker in so long, they need this to kind of reestablish themselves that we're the top dog. We're we're NDS bleeping you, and you're the Jacks. You should be chasing us. And especially in Fargo. I mean, I don't know. I mean, have the Jacks ever won 3 in a row in Fargo? It's got to have been a very, very, very long time. So,
certainly not in the Dome.
Not in the Dome era. No, it had been 50 years from, when they won in 2008, it had been 50 years. So, no, they haven't won 3 in a row in the Dome era. You'd have to go probably way, way, way back to, God knows when. But, I think that, for them, I'm not saying it's not for SDSU either, but I think they really need this from the regular season standpoint of, if they're going to, they want to establish some of the swagger and kind of the old NDSU mantra of what this is. And I think that matters. But I just think 2 factors. I think, again, how beat up are they? We don't really know. I think there's just some weird. I think Polasek is going to get that program going again, because I just think Matt Entz, he was a good coach, but I think he kind of lost some interest in the FCS level. I mean, we know, in fact, and that's basically been confirmed on some levels. Polasek has a little bit of that Craig Bowl fire to him. He's a little bit more of a wily guy, so it'll be kind of fun there. Like I said, there's just still some elements where I think SDSU has more talent than them. I think right now SDSU has the more talented team. Doesn't mean they're going to win. But like I said, I still want to see some more. There's just been some times where NDSU, you just don't know what you're going to get from them. Now, I think defensively, when they moved Sam Young down to, I mean, obviously they lost Cole Wisniewski. He's basically been out for the whole year. I don't think he's going to return. They moved their other good safety, Young, down to Strong, I believe was the move. And ever since then, their defense has been rolling. Their defense was good yesterday, but they haven't really played the strong schedule in conference either. They go to Illinois State, who lost their top running back. No one really bought UND. I think their non-conference schedule's been good. No, I don't think it's a trick. So yeah, I'm very, this is all you want though. I mean, this is the stretch right now. But yeah, I think North Dakota State, I'm just very curious why they didn't sit Cam Miller if he wasn't. That's, yesterday could be very damaging to them because they came away. It sounds like they came away pretty beat up. I don't know if they're just sandbagging a little bit, but I think you wonder if that's a little Pyrrhic because could they have just sat Cam Miller and still probably won that game? I think so, but it's probably a sprained ankle with him. We don't know if it's a high ankle. I mean, I would think if it's a high ankle sprain, he wouldn't have played, although the true Lord and Savior of football played through it and won an AFC title and a Super Bowl. So, you can play through it if you're a man, but or if you're the best quarterback in the world. But, those things linger. Even if it's I don't know whether it's a high or a low, it's one of those things where let's say he heals up and he's fully healthy. He's fully healthy this week. He steps on it the wrong way in the Fargo Dome on that turf, he could re-aggravate it easily on Saturday night. So it's not something where I think it's going to go away right away. He could, and if he doesn't have that mobility, he's still a heck of a player. He still had good passing numbers, but it does change their offense pretty significantly, especially against a Jackrabbit defense, which is going to be very different than what they've seen.
Yeah. So I looked it up first, just before I forget. I looked it up. SDSU's never won 3 games in a row in Fargo, even during the heyday when we were taking it to them, without a tie in between. There was one stretch in the 30s where the Jacks won in Fargo 3 times in a row, but in the middle of that was a tie. So there's never been 3 straight wins in a row up in Fargo. But also
it's like a hockey streak. They had what do they say in hockey? It's a win streak. Point streak. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you get a point streak in hockey because you got the 1 point for the tie. So no, they the Cam Miller deal is huge. But we've been informed by Brian that we are not his friends this week until Sunday. Fair enough. I think Ron Lowney's trying to jinx us in the chat here. He's just talking all sorts of smack. I do agree domes should be outlawed with Ryan.
By the way, I'll say this: Bison fans are perpetually nervous. They just find stuff. It's like I think that is the most I don't know what that fan base. I was there for a while. I mean, it was. There's always something they're nervous about when they shouldn't really have some reason to be. There's always something which makes them so fun to cheese a little bit. So I'm not, nervous, whatever. Have fun with it because enjoy it while they're down. You never know when they get back up. If they get back on top, which inevitably, I mean, spoiler, they probably will win a national championship again before we all get out of FCS, which. Eventually I do think everybody will be out of FCS and will be in whatever the new FCS is of the group of 5. But, enjoy it let's enjoy it while they're wallowing in whatever this is currently.
Yeah. And, that Cam Miller thing is huge though. Their run game's good. It's not unstoppable. I mean, if you look at Southern Illinois held them down a little bit in that game rushing. I mean, they didn't stop them. They still got 63 yards, but they only averaged 3.9 yards a carry. If Cam Miller is not at his full mobility, or at least a fashion of it, I think because that's part of what makes that offense so dynamic. He can move around in the pocket, extend plays, and hit guys, and not being able to do that effectively. I mean, that's a little bit, I think, of what happened in Southern Illinois without having to watch the game, obviously. That is something that they have relied on forever with their quarterbacks. That's what's killed SDSU going back for a decade when we would lose to them, is that you'd get killed by a pivotal rush for a long third down conversion or whatever by the quarterback escaping the pocket. So,
I think that's part of why SIU had some success with them yesterday, is because they knew. I think they saw right away Cam was not mobile and not going to be able to run that much, so they were able to kind of say, okay, we don't have to worry about this element of his game, and naturally that kind of took away that running element.
Yeah, and that's tough. Part of me is a little bummed out by that because I want to beat them at their best. I genuinely want to beat them at their best, partially for selfish reasons because I don't want to hear about, well, Cam Miller was hurt or whatever, and then partially just because you want to beat the best team on the field. Really lay it down who the better team is. I really have that. I don't, in my fandom heart, I guess I want to see us beat them at their best. That's my favorite. It feels so much better when you do that. So, but yeah, if it's something like a high ankle sprain, man, those things nag and they hurt. Holy God, do they hurt? I've had one before. There's no fun at all. I mean, it is really difficult to do any sort of planting and stuff. A regular sprain and a high ankle sprain are not in the same category to even be brought up. But yeah, if you end up with a banged up Cam Miller like that, and he's not super mobile, I think the Jacks are really going to try to force him into, try to force them to be one-dimensional throwing the ball, which is kind of what the Jacks defense has done here for the last most of the season, is to try to make teams, one-dimensional and force them to throw the ball, take the run game away. That's kind of been the hallmark of this defense going back years since Jimmy Rogers taken over. It's take away the run game, make them have to throw, and it's been a winning formula. And it really makes that, I don't want to say a lot easier, but it does make it slightly easier if the quarterback's not as mobile and the D-line that has really been coming along is able to pin their ears back. Because, if Youngstown State doesn't have as fast of a quarterback as they had, probably get 3-4 sacks on him that game at least, but he just literally outran defensive ends a couple times where you couldn't catch him. What's up, Chad? Thanks for joining us, buddy. Glad you made it after church. Sorry we put it during church, but
yeah,
options are limited on Sundays. Guess
well, in fairness, true. Of course, I'm half my family's Jewish, and a big reason I wasn't at the tailgates yesterday was Yom Kippur, so I was actually fasting, so I didn't really want to. I didn't want to go in tailgates and smell food when the only thing I was having was some throat lozenges, which might have been kind of cheating, but I had to have a voice, and my throat has been obviously. He's had a little stuff this week too. He's now eating some cookies, so he's a little quiet, thankfully. But yeah. So that was why, because I did shoot some video of the tailgates for a reporter who was one of our news reporters who went down to Vermilion and did D-Days. He was doing a story. He also shot the highlights for me of that game, but he was doing a story on the fact that both Hobo Day and D-Days were on the same time. Which thanks conference for scheduling the two teams at home, because that blows. But because I do know there are some people, maybe not the hardcore fans, who do like to actually go to both when they're on different days and just sample kind of both tailgates. But no, it was a great scene yesterday, obviously, at the tailgating and certainly at the game. I mean, the atmosphere is always great for Hobo Day, and that was well before the football team became what it is now. But, I'm speaking to people who know that there. But, I think the one thing we're kind of skipping over, because we're talking about all the skill players, is just where this game will be won, and the matchup that is really going to be fun to watch is going to be in the trenches, because man, it's going to be just it's going to be a war of attrition on those lines between SDSU and NDSU. They're both good. I mean, NDSU's defensive line. Again, there are some injury concerns there with the Bison, and part of me, I don't know what we're getting out of. Some of this I feel like I don't know if this is sandbagging. I feel like I know Polasek would sandbag. He seems like the kind of guy who would sandbag and exaggerate. So I don't know how banged up they actually are. And I think the media would maybe, I don't know if the media like Izzo, I know McFeely is a very cynical guy. I think the media would maybe kind of take at least his page and report what he's saying word for word. So they're going to follow what he's saying. So I don't know if they're this banged up or how much of a difference it makes, but their defensive line is really good. I did hear one of their other guys, Mason Miller, on the offensive line was maybe a little banged up yesterday. They've got an NFL prospect in Piers Gray Zabel, who, and you talk about how Cam Miller is motivated to beat the Jacks because he's never beaten them. I don't think Gray's ever beaten him. I think I think his first year was, I'm not sure if his first year was 2019. I think his first year was 2020 because his last year with Pier, they won the state title in Brookings when it was played in Dana and Dana J in 2019. So their lines are great. Obviously the SDSU line is not the same as last year's Hogs, but it's gotten progressively better, and it's still really good. And the Jackrabbit defensive line is just not allowing anything on the run. They've gotten better with their pass rush. I mean, it's just going to be, and another reason I've said the Coyotes might be a tougher matchup. Oh, by the way, the Jacks are it's going to be a war. I mean, they're going to be pretty physically beaten up in this game. So, that's going to be a tough thing for them to come back and have to play USD after, duking it out with the Bison for 60 minutes. So the battle inside is not going to be the sexy one that you get with having the skill players, but that's where it's going to be won. And, if you love football and you just kind of love the nitty gritty of it, the trench war is going to be your fun part on Saturday night.
Yep, the trenches is always what wins that game every time. If you win up front, you win the marker game. That's the way it goes. And it is going to be a physical, brutal, knockdown, drag-out fight the entire way. Even if you're up by 30 points, it's going to be violent every play. There's probably going to be some plays that one fan base is mad about and yelling at the other, calling them cheap, and that's the way it goes because it's a rivalry. That's what it is. There's plenty of that goes both ways. We don't bring it up as much, but it gets brought up all the time.
I hope they bring Roseboom on the sideline just to screw with him. That would be funny.
Oh God, yeah. I wish the bye week that they had was this next week, and that would have been amazing. The booze that would have rained out in that place would have been crazy. But there's plays like that go both ways. It's a rivalry game. It is what it is. I mean, I remember, God, who was the guy? He was kind of the hometown favorite up there, and he just destroyed our punt returner so far before he caught the ball that it landed on the ground where the punt returner was standing. It's like, that's kind of.
I don't remember this one. How recent was this one?
Oh God, it has to go back 5-6 years. His dad passed away.
I'll probably start posting
when he was playing.
Okay.
During that season, and I think it was the game right after that. It was a sad deal. With that, heart went out for the guy, but yeah, then was it Case Morlock maybe?
Might be. That might be. Yeah, he'd be from Moorhead, and I think his dad played for the Bison too. So
yeah, and he lit up the punt returner. But that's football. Stuff happens.
Of course, I'll have to be posting my old historic videos, but I'm sure the video of Jimmy Rogers exhuming Tyler Roll's soul from his body on that fourth down on that fumble play in 2007, which I guess you could say. I guess some people could say the Dakota marker thing technically started in 2004 because the Jacks did win the first marker game. But for my money, that where this thing really started was probably 2007 because that was I don't want to say the first meaningful game, but that was kind of the first big. Because again, this was not the big rivalry. I mean, this was kind of a made up thing because these programs had both left Had both jumped to Division I. Their true rivals had stayed behind. There was certainly a lot of acrimony, and still to an extent is. But there was no, I was in Fargo in 2006, and people were still making fun of it and do that. Like, this isn't real, oh, okay, we're paying for the Dakota marker, ooh, and I don't think anybody blamed him because you had to play for something. Nobody really knew what the future was going to bring for any of these programs or if this was going to work. 2007 was where it got real because that Bison team was just, I think that team could have won a national title if they'd been eligible or at least made a deep playoff run. I mean, Steve Walker, people still don't talk about how great it's gotten lost because they've had so many guys come through now, but that dude was just the picture of clutch for a quarterback. I think Joe Mays had actually graduated the year before, so that he wasn't on that team, but he was an NFL linebacker. Roll was having a phenomenal year. They had that team was loaded. They went in, they beat Central Michigan that year, who had a couple of guys by the name of J.J. Watt and Antonio Brown on the team. That, for my money, might be their best FBS win ever. They just dominated a great Central Michigan team. They beat Minnesota that year. Had a big comeback at Cal Poly. They were rolling, and SDSU had kind of gotten off to a slow start, but they were unbeaten in conference. And, the Bison were number one. I think there was like a wild thought they were going to get into an FBS bowl game. I think that was just a stupid rumor. But the intensity in that game, that was kind of where the rivalry really started, because rivalries are built on big, meaningful games. That one meant a lot, and for SDSU to win it, to end the Bison's run as an unbeaten team, a number one team, and to end Steve Walker's career that way. I mean, that was the first real salvo, and of course SDSU started a three-game winning streak, and I think that was one of the things that started to maybe kind of pivot the way that and the way Northern Iowa then beat the Bison the next year when they went to the Valley. That started to pivot the way Craig Bowl was recruiting, because I think he realized we need to get more physical or we're not going to be, the way they were doing things, recruiting wasn't working. So that was that was the first big moment, I think, that the marker became the first big moment to taking it what it is now. I know there had been 3 games before that. 2 of them had been really good. But that's the moment where it started transitioning from, okay, this is a nice little thing, to this becoming one of the, if not the premier rivalry in the FCS.
Yeah. Well, I think when we look back on this someday, and we're going to say that the creation of the marker is one of the key cogs in what created SDSU getting to the level to where they were. I think that is a huge key. It was a huge motivator to have that. I do think the marker trophy itself mattered a lot more to SDSU than it did NDSU. For a while there, because even the years that we'd beat them, then they'd beat us in the playoffs. So they took the mantra of, we play for rings, not rocks, and that's been their gag for years, right? And then
might be changing these days since they haven't seen the rock for a while.
I know, yep. And then I had NDSU fans in the tailgate lots who would go, hey, why do you guys, why do you guys hate us? Like they didn't have that hatred, for the rivalry. And it's not that SDSU, well, we hate NDSU, but we've got respect for NDSU. There's that factor in there. It's not just a pure hatred thing. It's like a lot of people like to say it's like a sibling rivalry where you want to beat them more than anything in the world. The way I've always put it is the marker game, you want to win that game more than anything in the world. The game against USD, you don't want to lose. It feels embarrassing to lose that game, which is a wrong term for this year, but generally overarching statement for the rivalry with USD since they've gone to Division I. You didn't want to lose that game because it was almost embarrassing to lose that game. Whereas the marker game, you just want to win it more than anything in the world. And they said, well, where's all this come from? Where's this all coming from? And I said, well, You have us knock you out of the playoffs a couple times, and then you tell me how you feel about it. Have us end your season and tell me how it feels. And it's getting to that point. And if it doesn't get there this year, and if the Jacks win this year, it'll be different. I think it's really going to crank it up for them, especially, God forbid, they end up getting sent to Brookings in the playoffs, if that's the way it plays out. I think that it losing to your rival tends to build that disdain and that burning on deep inside. And I think when they were just so much better and they were on a roll, it was hard for them to build that. And then as the Jacks have gotten better and better and better and better and have started beating them regularly, and it wasn't necessarily always an upset anymore, now it's become, I think they're getting tired of it, and I think it's building on the other side of the wall, and it's becoming a big deal. Ron, that's true. There's no bigger hate than Cat Grizz, but at least the teams always matter in the marker game. Whoa! Because the Grizz are frauds. And I think I was just looking, it's almost a decade. We're coming up on a decade of marker games that have been top 10 matchups straight. That's crazy. There's a decade straight of top 10 matchups. It's been a top 25 matchup for God knows how long. Well, I mean, if you look, SDSU and NDSU have
I think the last time it probably wasn't top 25 would have been 2011.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up. The stats poll posted the streaks of being in the top
11 was their last real down year. 11 or 10 was their last real down year. So
right.
I'm thinking it was 11, probably.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So it's been a top 25 game forever and ever and ever. It always has huge implications on the playoffs. Seth Meyer asks, do you guys think the marker game should be in the season finale? Personally, he likes it in the middle of the season. I can understand why people like it in the middle of the season, because both teams are so banged up. After that, you get some time to recover. But I think it should be the season finale. I just do. That's, to me, college football, your rivalry game, your biggest rivalry game, which, in my opinion, for SDSU, this is the biggest rivalry game. And I think it is for NDSU, whether they want to admit it or not. Matt Frazie's in here. He's going to say that he's going to tell me otherwise. But I don't feel UND is the bigger rivalry for NDSU, because they realistically, besides the upset last year, aren't really in danger of losing that game very often. And you want a game that matters at the end of the year.
Yeah,
however, this game's not on ESPN2 if it's the season finale, because that's rivalry week when everything else is. So I can understand having it in the middle of the season, because this game gives you a shot at having game day come up, really show the MVFC. I prefer it at the end of the schedule, but I get it. There's a fair amount of positives having it mid-season.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you brought up that I hadn't really thought about too much. I mean, because I agree. I would like to see. I mean, frankly, you should have this game, and you should have SDSU, USD, and this game at the end of the season, and the same with UND, NDSU. Those rivalry games should be your final games of the year. I mean, ideally, I think you probably end with the marker game, or if you want to rotate it, have it in, have the marker game and the USD, SDSU, UND, NDSU, whatever. The point is, ideally, those would be the end of the year games. But there is a good point there that you wouldn't have the marker game being on national TV, and you wouldn't have SDSU, USD the following week potentially being on national TV either, because you would have too much FBS stuff. But same time, who knows if that's going to continue moving forward? That who knows what the landscape's going to look like in the coming years. So that saying that we need to keep doing it because of that, I don't know if that's realistic. Yeah, these should be the end of the year. I mean, that's part of what makes Cat Grizz such a big thing, is that it's the final game. And I realize that, it could lead to getting banged up. At the same time, usually these teams get a bye week in the playoffs, so they're going to have time off to rest.
Well, let's be honest. For SDSU, from an SDSU standpoint, you'd love to have it the last game of the year at home, because that will cure the end of season weather woes. That will be a sold out game. That'll be a sold out time.
Yeah, that's true.
So that helps.
Yeah.
Garrett says the problem.
I mean, I think from the rivalry standpoint too. I mean, obviously there was a time for both schools where the in-state rivalry games meant more, but things changed. Obviously, the division. What would have happened if USD and UND had all come up together? Who knows? But this is the way it went. And the other reality is USD and USD, it now appears to be on a path where they're going to be relevant, but they didn't come up for a long time, and they've, at least not until recently, the games have not been as big on a national scale, or have not had as much of a stake. And it took USD and UND a long time to actually win a game in the series, and only recently have they become high stakes games. So, it's not just that the marker became a rivalry, it's that the game started to really matter. And then you had playoff games on top of them afterwards. Like you said, the Jacks were getting knocked out of the playoffs. So it started to add that little bit of spice to it. If the Coyotes and Jacks start playing a bunch of playoff games, and it's not just that, and it's also that one side was winning a bunch. And then when the other side started getting back at them, then it really started to amp things up. So, I realize most of the people are Jackrabbit fans on here. If the Coyotes get back at them and start winning a bunch of games, and it becomes an even series, then you might see that level of hatred really amp up again. But for now, but even then, it's so ingrained, and it's been going that way with NDSU, SDSU. I don't know. It would take a long time to probably catch up, but it's just been going so much longer at such a pace now that it is SDSU, NDSU. But at the same time, you can never have too many good rivalries. College football, despite realignment, is built. What makes college sports great are the rivalries, and it's never a bad thing to have more rivalries in college football. And
no,
to have two great, I would love to see UND and SDSU and UND, USD, and all those rival. I've heard some people. I don't understand this thing that people don't like the idea of the old NCC rivalries. I mean, yeah, you want the conference to be more balanced. I mean, again, I know we've talked about the Valley not being what it was, and so many programs aren't well funded anymore. But there's nothing wrong. I mean, that's what I'm going to miss about the old Mountain West. I'm going to miss the rivalry with Wyoming when we're in the Pac-12, I guess, whatever it is. I don't like seeing some random schedule. That doesn't excite me. I mean, there may be a brief minute of, there may be a brief minute where you're excited to play some random team, but you have to have rivalries, or it's just what's the difference between it? Just there's no fun in it. It's just if you're bored with things now, you're gonna get bored playing teams from random places after 10 years of this stuff. And I mean, so that's one of the things I've said. I kind of hope eventually, because we think the split's gonna happen. Some point there's going to be a new level. I don't think the present track of FCS is going to last forever. I'm not on the train that they need to be doing everything they need to do to get to the FBS now. But I've said, hey, I would love to see. I think they should have probably transitioned the old NCC to FCS a long time ago. That was probably a mistake. I hope, I would love to see the well-funded teams in the FCS now try to band together and move up at some point, because that might be their best way to control their own destiny at this point, because right now the conference system is not really kind to them. And the current setup prioritizes market size and market share and what can you bring for a TV contract. It does not prioritize, how well do you compete, how passionate is your fan base. Otherwise, UTEP would not be in the Mountain West. So, if you haven't looked at the current trends and understand that, I don't know what to tell you beyond that.
Well, I do want to go back here. First, I got to do read. We got one last. We got Cubby's Sports Bar and Grill of Brookings, South Dakota, and downtown Brookings. Your place for all the Jackrabbit action when it is a home or away game, but definitely for sure the away games. They will have every Jackrabbit game on the TVs. You definitely it's the place you want to be. we should have known that Youngstown was screwed. I had lunch at Cubby's, and then I went to Culver's, and I went to Blue Tide all this week, all of our sponsors, and that it just spells doom for any team we play. So I will be making sure to do that next week. Sorry, NDSU fans. But Cubby Sports Bar and Grill, Brookings, South Dakota.
Not sorry.
I still think they have the patio open up top. But Cubby Sports Bar and Grill, it is so cool to see the Jackrabbit Illustrated flag hanging up in there. That is really cool. I still kind of blows my mind walking in there and seeing that, but they're the place to go. They've got fantastic burgers. I had the Cubano when I was up there. That was very good. The fries are fantastic. Tons and tons of great food, Chislick, the whole 9 yards, and obviously a great selection of beers and drinks. So get on down to downtown Brookings, go to Cubby Sports Bar and Grill. They are a huge Jackrabbit supporter, and they deserve your support as well. Plus, they will have the coaches show on Monday with Jimmy Rogers, which, if you have not been listening to that coaches show, I really enjoyed the coaches show when Stig was on it. He was a little looser, but I think because Stig is such a legend, with Tyler, it just had, a different, almost honorific vibe to it when he's talking to him and everything. And when it's Jimmy and Tyler, you can tell they've known each other a long time. They give each other a hard time all the time. And it is genuinely my favorite show of the week. It is so fun to listen to. If you haven't listened, Gus Miller was on it last week. He was a hoot. We've got to get him on the pod. That guy is he is a character. So you got to listen to the coaches show, but you can be there in person at our sponsor, Cubby Sports Bar and Grill. So but I did want to touch
I would say I think Jimmy's loosening up a little bit too with the media. He's starting to get a little, now that he's done it for a full year. I mean, I don't think he's still fully comfortable, and I'm sure he would prefer not to do all the media stuff, but I think he's getting a little more used to it, and I think he's doing better at it. And more time, especially in Brookings and at his alma mater, I think he's kind of figuring the game out a little bit. So,
right, and I do want to just touch quickly a comment from Garrett a little back. He said the problem is with playing at the end of the season is that the rest of the game, it more adversely affects seeding and maybe the loser getting a 5 instead of a 3. I love that. That adds so much. I mean, the game already matters so much, but then because we've had it at the end of the season before, and that feeling of how much is on the line for that game, that is what makes a rivalry. If it makes or breaks you, that just amps that. It amps the crowd up. It amps the build up. It amps the feeling of winning up, or the feeling of losing up. The whole thing. It makes it matter even more, which I love. Like I said, I get why they have it where it is. Now, I didn't get it before they had the national TV contracts and stuff as much, but I understand where they have it being played. But there is another good point that was brought up. Seth said that USD has such a small fan base, it's hard to see fans going at each other like SDSU and NDSU fans, and that's a big part of these rivalries blossoming. And let's be honest, the internet matters now. As much as we complain on Jackrabbit Illustrated about the marketing being so focused on social media, that does build the rivalry a lot. If you have active social media fans, good or bad, it amps the rivalry up. And all the trash talk that goes on there and everything. And USD does not have many. They just don't. And that goes, we've talked about attendance and everything, but I think that does make a difference. And Matt Frazee, the head of the FFN, he agrees with Seth. Twitter and Facebook bashing between NDSU and SDSU is everywhere, and it adds fuel. I'm not sure USD fans have internet with how quiet they are. And I mean, honestly, they're dead quiet on the Twitters and Facebook and Instagram and wherever else you might run into each other. It's just it just is. It's quiet. It's quiet. And I run into.
I've seen a few things.
I ran into a USD fan.
I've seen a few things trying to.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, I've seen a few things trying to start up. Obviously, I haven't seen anything like they don't have anything like a Jackrabbit a Coyote Illustrated that I've seen. I've seen them trying to start. I've seen a few things trying to start up. A few things that are starting up. I know they have a YouTube. I think somebody has a YouTube show, a Back the Pack thing going on too. So there's a few things. There are something. It just depends. I mean, like I said, that again, I think when the football program was that depressed in terms of results for as long as it was, I mean, how could you get that involved? I mean, I speak from experience on that. CSU as down as we were for most of the last decade. Even now, I'm not all that in. I used to be a way more passionate fan in the message board era, pre-Twitter, when CSU was great in the early 2000s. We won yesterday, and I feel nothing. Like they beat San Jose State, and I'm like, okay, we're probably gonna. Another thing, by the way, for the people who really want the FBS, the standard of being competent is winning 6-7 games and going to a crappy bowl. So that doesn't really float my boat anymore. So it's like so I kind of get where some of these USD fans are at. Like if you've been that bad for that long, or you've been just mediocre, I'm not. I mean, CSU doesn't engage me anymore. And to be fair, I'm not exactly a big wig donor. I don't have the money to donate anything either, so they're not exactly coming at me for all the money. But so I get where they're coming from. If CSU had a wonderful product, I'd be out there pimping that all the damn time. But now we'll see if USD maintains this track, and like I said, we'll see, because USD is going to lose a lot of they'll lose a lot of really good seniors next year. You never know how the transfer portal is going to hit them. I think their recruiting's doing well as can be, considering who they're recruiting against in this conference. If they keep that track up, and they got again, they're on a new administration. Can they do some things differently? That's been another problem. I think they've had a lot of flux there where they haven't been able to keep the messaging necessarily consistent or figure out the messaging at times. But it's just SDSU has been on such a generational run, and it hasn't stopped in all sports, really, not just football, basketball, even the non-revenue sports, soccer. I mean, my God, look what's happened with volleyball right now at 16-0. They're the only unbeaten team in the country. Granted, there's still a lot to go. They still have to get over the USD hump, which legitimately USD that's really the one of the sports where you can say USD has absolutely clocked SDSU over the years is volleyball. But
they haven't been great this year, though.
Yeah, they did get swept by St. Thomas. They've been good, but it hasn't been like what they've been normally. They got swept by St. Thomas, but they did win a 5-setter. I mean, that'll be a tough one. That's one of the big hurdles that SDSU has to overcome. They've lost something like 8 years straight against the Coyotes, so they have to win. They really have to win the first home match, I think, in Brookings. If they lose that one, I think that would be a confidence buster for the volleyball team. So taking a brief football break as we talk some volleyball here. And I'll probably show a little volleyball. I'll show some volleyball highlights tonight because they did win last night. I have my show come up here at 5:30, and 9 and 10. But, I think, if they can, it just depends. Can they build a consistent program? If they do, I think some of those things will come along. But, remains to be seen. And, we'll see. Like I said, and there's different dynamics between the cities and the fan bases, and they're just always. But it's hard to say because I talk to people who are the old timers, and it's just you talk to people in the '80s, and they used to have that kind of passion. But things have obviously changed. That used to be easy to get people to fill up. It used to be easy to get people to come to games back in the day, and now it's obviously SDSU's got it rolling now, but. What these days it's hard. I mean, we've seen college attendance everywhere across the board in most places is down. So it's I don't know. There's so many weird factors. But USD just needs to kind of keep figuring out. We'll see what happens. If USD can build a consistent winner, I think some of those things will improve. But they're still not. They got to. And not just a consistent winner, it's got to be a thing where they're consistently at the top echelon, the way we've seen with SDSU and NDSU.
Yeah, they the thing is, you're going off of that. I was at a bar. I was at a bar 2 weeks ago watching the Jacks game there, celebrating the wife being done with drill. And a friend of mine brought a USD fan, and he goes, "Yeah, I'm a USD fan." I'm like, "Okay, cool." And I didn't even try to talk smack to the guy or anything, but then he started to talk smack a little bit, which you're supposed to. It's a rivalry, but immediately he goes, "Well, I didn't go to school for a football team, so I don't care. Our school's better." And that's a whole different discussion. But they need to win for a extended period of time at a high level in order to try to grow that again, and for that to blossom. Frederick Nelson said playing USD the last week of the regular season was the best. There was so much on the line for SDSU with seeding, and USD's only focus was beating the Jacks because they weren't going to make the playoffs. I hated that. Absolutely hated that. It absolutely encourages, in my opinion, and I'm not saying they did it, but it absolutely puts motivation on the line for some cheap shots during that game to ruin a team's season. And I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's a good thing. Yes. And I think that's stupid. If you want it to be end of the year and it's going to matter, it should matter for both teams about making it somewhere. And that's why I want the marker game the end of the season.
It wasn't entirely. There were some times I remember. I think in 2014 they were still was the second to last game. They were still kind of alive if they'd won out. Obviously they lost. That was a game where I know SDSU had a late pick and they ended up winning, I think, by 15. But it was a good game going to the fourth. So that was a game where if USD wins, they still could make the playoffs. Same things were, certainly in 20. I mean, both games really in the Dakota Dome. The first few times they were still in the playoff mix. So there've been a lot of times where even though USD wasn't a great, wasn't a top 5 team or a top 10 team, they were still in the playoff mix. So they weren't always necessarily a large. That's my wife's. She loves the key thing. It was kind of a theme for our wedding with the keys. We have a very large door. No, we have to lock it for our son because he gets into a lot of stuff. They're genuinely, because I did it last year when we had when there was so much hype going into that USD SDSU game, and there genuinely were some really good end of the season games after that first. Obviously USD had such a rough 2012. I don't think we need to go into that. Was such a bad 2012 for USD, that first year under Joe Glenn. But there were genuinely some really good games after that. A couple blowouts were still in there, but they had some playoff chances. And I remember especially, I think the Strevlers last year down in the Dome was a really good game. Obviously the game that shall not be mentioned in Brookings, but is going to live forever, even though Carson Camp is once again in the transfer portal somehow. So there were a lot of really interesting games, and some games where SDSU got saved by miraculously. They had some games where it just seemed like they always had a pick six to kind of save them in the fourth quarter a couple of times. So I hate that these games are being played in October. It feels like they should be in November. But, like I said, this year it works out all right because they're both getting national television. Giants in the Borg household, even though I'm short as all get and everybody's short. So hopefully my son will manage to grow, but I don't think he's going to get that. But we are getting on here. We should probably wrap up here pretty soon, even because it is an NFL Sunday. Even though are the Packers playing today? I haven't checked.
Yes, they are. Who are they playing?
Okay, so
I don't remember.
Okay, well, I mean, it's all kind of irrelevant because the Super Bowl 59 teams, the Chiefs and Vikings, are not playing. There you go. So there's really, is it really entertaining if the Chiefs and Vikings aren't playing in a week? So sorry.
Look at you go.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I don't care about the NFC, but and now my son has found the horn. So to be fair, I don't really care too much about the NFC. Just we know how this is ending in the NFL, right? I mean, it's kind of like, hey, buddy, can I see the horn for a second?
They're at least going to make the Super Bowl because the NFL needs they need to have the girl be able to bring an extra viewer. So yeah, Taylor's going to bring for viewers, so they got to get her. They got to get her to the Super Bowl.
Here's the thing: you got to. Yeah, we got to wait, buddy. Almost done. The thing about it is, I always kind of view the Jackrabbit and we know Jimmy Rogers is a Chiefs fan because he's basically said as much to me. I mean, I wore my Chiefs polo to the spring game, and everybody was mad at me, like, how can you wear red to the spring game? And then he's like, hey, right on. So after everybody was telling me, how can you wear red here? And he was right on. You got the Chiefs thing. You look good, buddy. So, that was a nice thing. But no, I said the Chiefs and Jackrabbit dynasty kind of remind me of I know, buddy, but I can't have you blowing the shofar while we're doing our show. We're almost done. But okay, go blow it over by mommy though, okay? There you go. And of course he's not gonna do that. But anyway, the Chiefs dynasty and the Jackrabbit dynasty are kind of the same because they're the fun ones. And the Bison and the Patriots are similar because they were both like the no fun ones. I mean, does anyone at North Dakota State have fun? It seems like they all seem like they're robots. Like even when they win, it's like they're like the Miracle movie. It's like the Russians. They get shot if they smile. That's like the Bison dynasty. It's like every time. I swear to God, it's so robotic. I remember. I remember when Easton Stick was up for the Peyton Award. He's like, well, if we win it, I'm just going to be in my hotel room eating a dinner. It's like, you're up for an award, man. It's not going to affect your preparation for the game to be at a banquet. I remember Gronowski was there a year ago, and he accepted his award. He played fine. I guess that was why he threw one interception against Montana. Sure, it's because he ate a meal the night before, accepted award, and posed for a picture. Yeah, that's really why, the Chiefs dynasty is only fun if you're a Chiefs fan. Well, sure, and I'm a Chiefs fan, so deal with it. The script writer's a Chiefs fan probably. But it's like these Bison people, they got so wrapped up during this dynasty. It's like, if we go to an awards banquet, it's going to affect our preparation. We might lose the game. Are you freaking kidding me? Go enjoy it. Have fun. It's like, it's supposed to be fun for these things. I think the Jackrabbits actually have fun. It's like, you look at Jimmy dancing around in the post game. They put that clip. My son enjoyed that clip. Like, I've seen the Bison post and stuff, but like, I've never gotten that, not since the early days of the Bison dynasty with Bowl, but it just seems like everything's just robotic and it's almost like a professional organization. And it was very Belichickian, to use that word. And, it's like, what do you associate with, as much as you may not like the Chiefs, yeah, but, I know the Patriots won more, but give the Chiefs some time, baby. We got some more time here. It's like, the Chiefs, as much as you may not like the fact they're winning, we don't have no deflate gates. We don't have no weird stuff going on. It's, we play the fight for your right to party music, and we have, party in the locker room. What are the Jacks doing? They party after a win, Yep. So who would you rather be? The dynasty that has more fun, or the dynasty that seems like it's robotic and, maybe it's cheating? I'm not saying the Bison cheat. I'm just saying, the Patriots did. So, but either way, I'm semi-joking here, people. Don't take it too seriously, but yeah. And every time the Chiefs win a Super Bowl, it seems like the Jacks win a national title. So do with that as you will.
That's true. I do want to say, shout out for Alex's Lemonade Stand. Chad raised $660 with the pudding shots this week, which was awesome. For Alex's Lemonade Stand. Jim Poppin is up to $140. He has pledged for Alex's Lemonade Stand. Jim Poppin did a ton of work getting people to do the Lemon Top Challenge for photos, which are $10. You get $10 per photo that gets donated to fight childhood cancer. Absolutely, I don't know why you wouldn't. It doesn't cost anything, and the money goes to a good cause. Northwestern Mutual donates that money. You just tag Northwestern Mutual, Alex's Lemonade Stand, and then hashtag #GoJacks on any platform, on Facebook, on Twitter.
I was gonna say that's a terrific cause. I know Aiden Bauman won that a year ago down in Frisco. So yeah, I mean that was that's terrific cause. Jackrabbit fans, get into that. Coyote fans, get into that. If there's anybody who's, because we're on the FCS, we got the platform, and I know we're on the several platforms here. If you got anybody who's involved in that, get in on that. That's a good deal.
Yep, he won last year because all our money was divided between 3 guys, and he was the only one. That's factual. We raised more money.
Just can't give him anything. Can't give him anything.
Just
well,
saying.
we got next week for that rivalry to percolate, and like I said, hopefully next week we're talking. You know, I'm gonna stress this: both fan bases root for the other because I'm saying this right now. If SDSU and USD win, very good chance that game could be again another primetime game under the lights in Brookings, and maybe a chance a certain pregame show comes if the Jackson Coyotes both win. Maybe. I don't want
There's potential. I don't think SDSU fans have to worry about cheering for USD. They're going to beat Youngstown by 1 billion.
I don't think it's never a guarantee. The Ice Castle's a weird place to play. It just is. I never guarantee it on the road. I think and that quarterback can be a little. The quarterback is a little. The mobile guy is a little bit of a tricky guy, but I do expect them to eventually comfortably win at some point. 14, 17, something like that. You never know. Like we even saw the Bison have a little trouble with SIU. I'm sure the Coyotes might be looking ahead a little bit, maybe, but I don't have much concern that they're gonna. But like I said, if both teams have one loss, I think there is. And the nice thing is we won't be talking about the whole game day thing because everybody's gonna be looking toward. Nobody's looking ahead from the marker game, obviously.
No.
But yeah, both teams win. We know they looked at we know game day looked at it a year ago. I think it's more likely. There's more, and the FBS slate next week is not as good. I don't think have they already announced that they're going to Georgia, Texas? I'm assuming now.
Yep. I found it on their Twitter. They announced.
Yeah, that was a no-brainer. I know I think Craig Haley was kind of posing that they might go to Fargo, but I looked at that. I'm like, yeah, they're going to, unless Georgia and Texas just had eaten it this week. Yep. I'm like, they're not going to pass up Georgia, Texas. Yep. But next week, I think it's a little more up in the air. I mean, I don't know that they would do Ohio State and Nebraska because they just did Ohio State and Oregon. I think Navy and Notre Dame is possible. It's just not as – and again, I've always said with Lee Fitting getting laid off, he was kind of the FCS driver. Mm-hmm. We'll see. I mean, first things first, you got to go 1-0, as Jimmy would say. Both teams do. But, man, it's just going to be 2 fun weeks. You don't always get these kind of You don't always get these kind of games in the FCS, as we're seeing. The conference is not what it was. My last thought. We're not going to spend any more time as we wrap this up. Eventually, as we've said, I think SDSU will move to whatever the new level is. And I think if the Mountain West came calling now, they would probably have a tough time declining it, just because I think that's more from a revenue standpoint. Because, I think just the potential for what they could make in terms of a TV deal is probably I think they would have a tough time saying no to that. So I know if Mike McFeely sees this, he'll cackle and say, "Ha, I'm right." But no, I mean, in terms of the quality of the football, it's really not that much better. Some of those Mountain West, what the Mountain West is going to be, it's not going to be that. Trust me, those teams. A lot of those teams, they spend more at that level, but they don't really. They're not traditionally powers. They kind of ebb back and forth, and they're losing the guts of that conference. So I think if they came calling the Mountain West, they would accept it, but you take the deal just because you're probably going to make a lot out of the TV money of it. So, but
that and when you do it, the Mountain West compared to any like CUSA, there's nothing there for me. There's no rivalries.
Yeah, exactly.
The MAC, there's
TV
no rivalries.
Right.
The Mountain West, you have what will almost certainly be a rivalry with Wyoming. Hypothetically, if Montana State moved up too, then that's a rivalry too for both of those teams. You go from a conference in the MVFC where you have 2 rivalries, one, kind of because it's UND, to the Mountain West where you would have 4 really fun ones. I think those would all turn out to be rivalries. We've seen Ron on here all the time chirping. It's not a full-on rivalry with Montana State, but there's a little bit there. There's some juice behind that just from the amount of playoff matchups and stuff when we face them. Montana they're just so obnoxious that it would just automatically become a team you love to hate. And then Wyoming's right there. So that is the alluring part to me. But yeah, you're right. That's so far back burner right now. I think with how everything is going for these 2
Yeah,
weeks, I think deserve full attention on the marker and all that jazz.
I mean, that's my point. Yeah, I mean, the point is, I think all that stuff will take care of it in time. My thing has been, I would rather they just, because I know realignment's going to come up, and just addressing that briefly.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather they
Always
wait
does.
till the split. I think yes, I think that door is always going to be open. If you haven't watched over the last 10 years, it's ever changing. It's going to continue to change. And I think once there's a split, the priority then becomes how competitive are your programs, blah, 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 blah. But, the thing we haven't had, we just, because the FCS is what it is and college football is what it is, a lot of these programs just can't afford. It's just the way the economies are right now. A lot of these programs just can't afford it right now. But we don't necessarily get these kind of games every week. They're big rivalry games, and they're meaningful rivalry games in the national scope. You don't necessarily get this all the time. So these are going to be a couple of special weeks. It's going to be a special month because, obviously we'll have these 2 weeks for SDSU, but, looking later on, I'm looking forward to seeing USD, NDSU at the end of the season. I'm also kind of looking forward to seeing Missouri State because, frankly, they're looking kind of good too. That might be a little more interesting at the end of the season than we're giving it credit for. We haven't even touched on the rest of the FCS. We're not going to have time. But, I mean, this is when you make your bread, and it's setting up for a terrific end of the season, and the playoffs could be pretty fun too. So it gets really good now. We've made it through kind of the teaser portion, and now we get to the good stuff.
Yep, it is. The really fun weeks are upon us. The really fun up until the playoff is upon us. Reminder, Jack, the Rants and Raves by Matt dropped about an hour ago, so everybody loves reading those. Those are out. He got back from Nashville and wrote those up. I mean, talk about commitment. Shout out to Matt flying back from Nashville.
Could have been too many rants after that game yesterday.
Out. No, I'm pretty sure it's pretty rave heavy. So so go check that out. Thank you everybody for listening. Enjoy your Sunday
and bear with us.
NFL games.
And bear with us the next 2 weeks because obviously it's going to be up in the air. We still don't know the USD start time, and next week's going to be wild. But bear with us. We'll figure it out as we go. The show is not known for its formality. My son's been screaming during half of it, but that's the fun. Yep. We're not doing this professionally. We're just having fun. And we hope you are too.
Yep, Kubota country. We're just fun. All right. We'll see you guys. Have a good weekend.
Take it easy.